I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
King Charles expected another routine private briefing. Instead, a sealed royal letter placed before him changed the temperature of the room in seconds. Written during Queen Elizabeth II's final period of life, the message contained a deeply personal wish concerning Catherine, and it was far more consequential than Charles had been prepared to hear. He read one passage twice, lowered the paper, and said nothing. Those present immediately understood. This was not simply a mother's farewell. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles dismissed the advisors and remained alone with the letter. A royal letter, in this case, meant private written guidance preserved outside normal palace correspondence, not a public order or law. It had been kept sealed until advisors believed the monarchy had reached a major transition point. Now that moment had come. The message named Catherine as the woman Elizabeth trusted to protect continuity, family unity, and royal tradition when the older generation was gone. The king read that passage again. His hand settled over the paper, almost as if holding it still could quiet what it awakened inside him. Elizabeth had not stripped him of authority, yet her words touched a deeper wound. His mother had placed part of the family's emotional future in Catherine's hands. Charles felt grief, pride, and something harder to admit, the sting of realizing that the late queen had seen a strength in his daughter-in-law that she believed the monarchy might one day desperately need. Catherine knew nothing about the letter. That made the burden heavier. Charles understood that she had already carried years of expectation, without knowing Elizabeth had quietly imagined an even greater role for her. He wanted to protect her from demand, but honoring his mother's final judgment meant he could not simply lock the message away. The choice now belonged to him. Then another paragraph changed everything. Elizabeth wrote that Catherine possessed a rare ability to command loyalty without demanding it. She could calm conflict without appearing weak, and she could preserve dignity without turning duty into a contest. But the praise came with a warning. Rising influence could create resentment inside the household if others began to believe affection had become authority. Charles stopped. One name entered his mind immediately: Camilla. The queen consort had fought for years to secure her place beside him, and this message could make Elizabeth's trust in Catherine feel like a judgment against her. Before Charles could tell Catherine what had been left behind, he first had to face the people whose futures were suddenly tangled inside those final words. The letter named Catherine, but its consequences immediately reached far beyond her. Charles had spent his life preparing to inherit a crown defined by his mother. Camilla had fought for decades to earn stability beside him. William had built his own vision of the monarchy around duty, privacy, and family. Now Elizabeth's final words threatened to alter all of those relationships at once, not by removing anyone's position, but by revealing whom she trusted most, with something deeper than rank. Charles knew he could not keep William outside the truth for long. He asked his son to meet privately and told him that Elizabeth's letter described Catherine in language far stronger than simple praise. The Prince of Wales, the title given to the monarch's direct heir, listened without interrupting. When the king finally stopped speaking, William did not smile. He did not ask what influence the message might give his wife. His first question was quieter. Did Catherine know? William feared exactly what his father had feared. Catherine had spent years becoming one of the family's most dependable figures, not through dramatic demands, but through discipline, patience, and consistency. Elizabeth had noticed that. Their bond had grown through small conversations, steady appearances, and private moments after difficult family occasions. The prince understood that his wife would not hear the letter as a reward. She would hear responsibility. And responsibility, in royal life, rarely arrived without sacrifice. Camilla received only a carefully prepared summary. She listened as an aide explained that Elizabeth had placed unusual trust in Catherine's future role within the family. The queen consort, the wife of a reigning king, without sharing his constitutional powers, gave no immediate reaction. After the aide left, she removed her glasses, placed them beside untouched tea, and sat in silence. She had spent decades surviving judgment, scandal, and resistance to secure her place beside Charles. Now another woman's name had appeared inside Elizabeth's final private vision of the monarchy. William began remembering details he had once dismissed. After several major family gatherings, Elizabeth had deliberately asked Catherine to remain behind. Their conversations were never publicly explained. At the time, the future king assumed they concerned ordinary family matters. Now those meetings felt different. His grandmother may have been preparing Catherine long before anyone understood what she was doing. Then Charles received another blow. A documented palace inventory confirmed that Elizabeth's papers included a second sealed note, addressed only to Catherine. The king had no authority to open it. Even he did not know what his mother had written inside. That uncertainty changed everything. Before Catherine could receive the note, Charles needed to understand why Elizabeth had written it at all. The deeper he searched into the letter's history, the clearer the answer became. His mother's final wish had been born from one deeply uncomfortable family incident that nobody involved had ever truly forgotten. Years before the sealed letter reached Charles, one private dinner at Windsor quietly changed Queen Elizabeth's view of Catherine forever. There was no public scandal, no shouting match, and no dramatic announcement. Yet by the end of that evening, the monarch had seen something inside the younger woman that several others had missed. A family disagreement had threatened to turn bitter. Charles had withdrawn into silence. William was furious. And Catherine made one decision that Elizabeth would later remember when writing her final wish. William had arrived already carrying frustration. The family had gathered after weeks of disagreement over future royal responsibilities, especially how much pressure should fall on the younger generation as the older members slowed down. A constitutional household, in simple terms, is the royal family operating within its official public duties, rather than simply as a private family. Elizabeth feared those two worlds were beginning to collide. She could see duty becoming personal, and personal resentment beginning to affect decisions. Charles tried to explain that greater responsibility was unavoidable. William heard something different. To him, his father was asking Catherine and him to absorb more pressure without acknowledging the cost it placed on their family. His voice sharpened. Charles became defensive. The future king pushed his chair back as if preparing to leave, and the older man fell silent. Elizabeth watched both of them with growing concern. Then Catherine acted. Catherine quietly asked the staff to leave. She moved closer to William and Charles, and refused to let the argument end with one of them walking away. She told the prince that anger would not solve what fear had created, then asked Charles to stop speaking as an heir and speak as a father. William initially resisted her intervention. He felt she was asking him to surrender when he believed he was protecting their future. But she stayed calm, and that calm slowly changed the room. Charles finally admitted what he had been hiding. He feared disappointing Elizabeth, while also failing William. The confession disarmed his son. The prince stopped arguing long enough to hear the man behind the role. Catherine never chose a side. She simply kept both men talking, until anger gave way to something more honest. Elizabeth remembered that moment. According to a documented account, later preserved by her private secretary, the Queen said Catherine had achieved something rank could not force. She had restored trust without humiliating either man. That same night, the monarch dictated a private note stating that the younger woman could calm conflict without weakening authority. Years later, those exact qualities appeared again in Elizabeth's final letter. Charles now understood why. But understanding the past was only the beginning. Once Catherine heard what the late queen had written about her, Another voice inside the family was ready to challenge what those words truly meant. Charles chose a private room, dismissed the aides, and asked Catherine to sit. He struggled through the first few sentences before finally sliding Elizabeth's letter across the table. Catherine read in silence. Her eyes stopped on the line describing her as the person most capable of protecting the monarchy's human center. Then the door opened. Camilla entered before either could hide what had happened, and within moments, 3 people were facing a truth none of them could reduce to protocol. Catherine looked back at the page before speaking. The final wish was not a new title, legal office, or public promotion. In simple terms, it was Elizabeth's personal request that she become the family member trusted to steady both older and younger royals when private tension threatened public duty. That distinction mattered. It meant Catherine was being given responsibility without formal power. And that could be even more dangerous, because nobody could clearly measure where influence ended and authority began. Charles watched her carefully. Catherine told him she had never wanted to stand between him and his mother's legacy, and she certainly did not want Elizabeth's words used to suggest that the king had somehow failed. The monarch answered with painful honesty. That hesitation, that instinct to protect him rather than elevate herself, was exactly what his mother had admired. Catherine lowered her eyes. The praise did not comfort her. It made the weight heavier. Camilla understood enough before anyone explained. She saw the open letter, the silence between them, and Catherine's expression. The Queen Consort asked Charles one direct question. Had Elizabeth named Catherine above everyone else? The king paused. It lasted only seconds, but the answer was already there. Camilla looked toward Catherine, then back to her husband. She could accept affection, she said, and she could accept trust. What she could not accept without question was a private message quietly becoming a second source of influence inside Charles's reign. Catherine did not defend herself. Instead, she slid the letter back across the table. She told Charles that if honoring Elizabeth meant creating rivalry, she would rather carry the words privately than turn them into power. Camilla studied her, expecting resistance and finding none. That refusal changed the emotional balance of the room. The Queen Consort was still unsettled, but Catherine had denied her the easiest fear, that this was a contest she intended to win. Charles felt the conflict tighten around him. His mother's wish had brought truth into the open, but truth alone could not decide what happened next. The palace now had to determine whether Elizabeth's private letter carried any formal significance at all. What began as a family confession was moving into the machinery of the crown, where affection mattered far less than authority, precedent, and who had the right to act. The letter carried Elizabeth's handwriting, her judgment, and the emotional force of a final instruction. But none of those things automatically made it law. Charles soon found himself confronting the most uncomfortable distinction of all, the difference between a mother's wish and a sovereign's command. While advisors examined the wording, he sat at the head of the table, knowing that whatever they concluded could either calm the family or turn private grief into a struggle over influence. Charles listened as constitutional advisors explained what the document could and could not do. Constitutional authority, in simple terms, meant the legal powers and formal duties attached to the crown, not personal influence inside the family. Elizabeth's letter carried immense moral weight, but it could not change succession, create a new office, remove titles, or transfer royal power. The king remained fully in control. Catherine had been entrusted with responsibility, not granted authority. The answer should have brought relief. It did not. Charles tapped one finger against the folder and stared down at the words his mother had left behind. Legal clarity could tell him who held power, but it could not tell him how to live with what Elizabeth believed. The monarch understood that Catherine's importance had now been defined in a way no statute could measure. That made the situation harder, not easier. William refused to let his father hide behind procedure. In a private conversation recorded in a palace account, the prince told Charles that burying the letter simply because it was uncomfortable would dishonor the intention behind it. He reminded the king that Catherine had never asked for influence and had already refused to treat Elizabeth's words as a promotion. William pressed harder. Honoring his grandmother, he said, would not weaken Charles unless the monarch chose to see his wife's strength as a threat. Then the advisors delivered the most revealing detail yet. Catherine's separate sealed note contained no political instruction at all. Elizabeth had asked her to protect the relationship between William and Charles whenever royal duty threatened to turn father and son into rivals. The message was deeply personal. It was not about crowns, rank, or control. It was about preventing ambition, pressure, and inherited duty from tearing apart the two men who would carry the monarchy forward. Charles finally understood. His mother had not been elevating Catherine above Camilla, and she had not been questioning his right to lead. Elizabeth had seen the same danger that surfaced years earlier at Windsor, family fractures becoming institutional fractures. That realization should have ended the tension. Instead, it sharpened it. Camilla now knew exactly what Catherine had been asked to protect, and for the first time, she had to confront where that left her. The legal question was settled. The family question was about to become far more painful. Camilla did not shout. She did not challenge Catherine publicly. Instead, she did something Charles found more unsettling. She withdrew. At a private evening meeting, her chair remained empty until the final minute. When she finally arrived, she spoke only about the agenda and never once mentioned Elizabeth's letter. Charles recognized the pattern immediately. The woman beside him felt pushed outside an emotional circle she had spent decades fighting to enter. And suddenly, his mother's final wish carried a human cost. Charles tried to keep the situation from becoming a public contest. Palace staff quietly adjusted private schedules, so Catherine's new family responsibility would not appear to overlap with Camilla's place beside the king. That distinction mattered, because the queen consort's role remained official and visible, while Catherine's responsibility came from Elizabeth's personal trust, rather than a formal appointment. William supported the separation immediately. He and his wife refused every suggestion that the letter should produce a new title, special office, or symbolic promotion. Camilla finally broke the silence in a private recorded conversation with Charles. She told him she did not resent Catherine. That was not the wound. What hurt was realizing that Elizabeth may never have trusted her with the family's emotional future in the same way. The queen consort had spent years enduring judgment to build a stable life beside the monarch, and now one private letter seemed to expose a boundary she had never been allowed to cross. Charles reached for her hand. Camilla pulled away for only a moment, then apologized, but the gesture struck him harder than any argument could have done. He understood exactly what had happened. His mother's final wish had not taken anything from his wife-in-law or rank, yet it had made her feel emotionally excluded. The king was suddenly trapped between loyalty to the woman beside him and fidelity to the judgment of the mother he had lost. Catherine learned about the exchange through William and reacted immediately. She asked the prince to arrange a private meeting with Camilla. Elizabeth's wish, she said, could not be honored by making another woman feel diminished. William warned her that reassurance might sound like pity, and pity could make the situation worse. Catherine did not retreat. Silence, she answered, would be worse. Then Charles made an unexpected choice. Before the two women could meet, he asked William to walk with him alone. No aides, no papers, no palace language to hide behind. For the first time since the letter had been opened, the king stopped asking what Elizabeth wanted from the monarchy and began asking what she had wanted from him. No secretaries followed them. No red boxes waited on the table. Charles and William met simply as father and son, carrying years of unspoken strain between them. The king admitted that Elizabeth's letter had shattered him, because it exposed a fear he had never voiced, that even at the end of her life, his mother still believed someone else might be better at holding the family together. William's answer changed the meaning of the letter completely. Charles had insisted there would be no official record of the conversation. A red box, in royal life, is the case used to carry important state papers for the monarch. But this meeting was not about government. It was about family. William sat opposite his father and listened as the king admitted how deeply the letter had cut. He had spent decades trying to earn Elizabeth's approval, and now her trust in Catherine had reopened an old wound he thought the crown had finally buried. William did not soften the truth. He told his father that Catherine had never treated Elizabeth's words as authority and had already rejected any idea of a symbolic promotion. The prince reminded Charles that his wife had asked for nothing. That was exactly why the late queen had trusted her. Elizabeth had not chosen Catherine to replace the king, he said. She had chosen her because she would never try. Charles stayed silent. William pushed further. In a private conversation later preserved in a family account, the prince told his father that the letter was not a judgment against him. It was protection for him. Elizabeth had understood how duty could turn love into rivalry, especially between a reigning king and the son expected to follow him. Catherine's role was to keep that fracture from becoming permanent. William then revealed her next step. Catherine wanted to meet Camilla privately and promised that she would never use Elizabeth's letter to override, embarrass, or compete with the queen consort. She would carry the responsibility quietly, or not at all. Charles immediately recognized the pattern. Years earlier at Windsor, Catherine had not won an argument. She had stopped one. She had not demanded influence. She had reduced conflict. That realization changed something in the king. For the first time, he stopped reading his mother's words as evidence that she trusted someone else more. He began to see them as evidence that she had understood exactly where he was most vulnerable. Charles and William left the conversation closer than they had entered it. But reconciliation inside the family came just as pressure outside it began to rise. Distorted versions of Elizabeth's final wish were already spreading, and the palace could no longer rely on silence. The family had finally understood the message, but outside the palace walls, Britain was about to receive an entirely different version of the story. By morning, Elizabeth's private words were no longer private. A national newspaper appeared with Catherine's photograph beneath a stark front-page headline, "The Queen's Last Trust." Television panels immediately debated whether the late monarch had quietly chosen the princess as the monarchy's future emotional center. Outside Buckingham Palace, visitors gathered beneath the gates reading the story on their phones. One sealed letter had escaped the family room and entered public mythology, and Charles knew silence could now do more damage than disclosure. Charles moved quickly. Palace staff prepared a short statement explaining that Elizabeth's letter concerned family continuity, not a new office or transfer of royal power. Constitutional authority, in simple terms, meant the legal powers held by the sovereign, and those powers remained with the king. The distinction mattered because public debate was already turning Catherine's private responsibility into something far larger. If the palace allowed that misunderstanding to grow, a message meant to preserve unity could create the very rivalry Elizabeth had feared. Catherine watched the coverage beside William and felt the story slipping away from its real meaning. Commentators compared her with Camilla. Headlines framed trust as competition. The princess told her husband that Elizabeth's words had been deeply personal, yet they were now being used to divide two women who had never asked to fight for the same place. William reminded her that silence would allow others to define the letter for them. Catherine knew he was right, but the pressure still felt cruel. Camilla saw the same front page and nearly withdrew from a scheduled royal appearance. According to a private palace account, she told an aide she had no desire to stand before cameras while the country debated whether another woman had been chosen above her. Before she could cancel, Catherine asked to speak with her alone. The conversation was direct. Catherine told Camilla that Elizabeth's request only worked if the women around Charles strengthened each other, rather than became symbols of opposing camps. Camilla listened without interruption. Catherine promised that she would never use the letter to embarrass, override, or compete with the Queen Consort. The older woman finally accepted what had been difficult to see through the hurt. Elizabeth had assigned responsibility, not supremacy. Camilla kept the engagement. Catherine kept the promise. Outside Buckingham Palace, the story reached its most vivid public moment. A crowd gathered near the forecourt, while broadcasters described the letter as Elizabeth's final statement of trust in the next generation. Visitors held copies of the newspaper beneath the palace flag, turning one headline into the image that captured the entire episode. Charles now faced the final choice. Britain had already decided what the letter meant. He had to decide how to honor his mother without allowing her final wish to divide his reign. The world had written its headline. Charles now had to write the ending. Charles did not create a new title. He did not issue a decree placing Catherine above anyone else. Instead, he chose something quieter and far more personal. With William, Catherine, and Camilla present, the king placed Elizabeth's letter on the table and told them that his mother's final wish would be honored exactly as she intended, not as a transfer of power, but as a promise that the family would never allow ambition, resentment, or rank to destroy the trust holding them together. Charles made the decision formal in one important sense. Elizabeth's letter would remain inside the family's private royal archive, a protected collection of personal records preserved for history rather than used as active constitutional policy. That distinction mattered. The message would be remembered, but it would not become a weapon. Catherine accepted the responsibility exactly on those terms. She would support William, keep communication open with the king, and step in when generational tension threatened to become permanent division. Charles then said what he had avoided from the beginning. He told Catherine that the letter had hurt him because, for one brief and painful moment, it felt as though his mother had chosen someone else to repair what he could not. Catherine answered without hesitation. Elizabeth had not asked her to replace him. She had trusted her to stand beside him when duty became heavy and family relationships began to crack. The king finally heard the difference. Camilla moved closer to Catherine and accepted her hand. The gesture ended the fear that Elizabeth's final words would divide the two women into competing symbols. William watched his father carefully and saw the tension finally leave him. The prince understood that the family had reached the point Elizabeth had hoped for. Not agreement forced by rank, but unity chosen after conflict. Charles reread the final paragraph one last time. Its meaning now felt painfully clear. Monarchy did not survive through inheritance alone. Ceremony could preserve tradition, and obedience could preserve order, but neither could preserve a family without trust. Elizabeth's final wish had never been about giving Catherine more power. It had been about protecting the people who carried that power from being destroyed by it. The king returned the letter to its case himself and closed it. No further announcement was needed. Catherine would carry the trust quietly. Camilla would keep her dignity. William had regained something deeper with his father. And Charles, who had begun this journey shattered by what he thought his mother's words meant, ended it strengthened by finally understanding them. There was no battle left to win. Elizabeth's letter had done what she intended. It had forced the family to face resentment, fear, and pride, and choose unity instead. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.